USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12 to join the Big Ten. As a result, the Pac-12 is expected to explore expansion. Which teams could the conference pursue to replace USC and UCLA? What are the best options for this conference going forward? Let's dive in to all that and more in college football realignment and expansion. I'm Steven Lassen. Please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Steven L. CFB. A key question that the Pac-12 will have to answer before deciding which teams to add is how many. The Pac-12 is down to 10 without USC and UCLA. Does the conference want to go to 12? Does it want to go to 14? Perhaps even 16? Would it consider a merger with the Big 12? There are a lot of options on the table. Keep in mind, financial reasons will be a factor here. New markets, certainly getting into Texas could be valuable for the Pac-12. However, with USC and UCLA leaving, the financials, especially for the Pac-12, are going to take a hit. So which teams can add the most value by adding new markets and the best on-field products are certainly going to be prioritized in this round of expansion for the Pac-12. Looking at the candidates for expansion in the Pac-12, it starts with a lot of teams from the Big 12. Of course, the Big 12 just went through its own round of expansion by adding BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. But within the Big 12, there are several teams that could be an option for the Pac-12. I think right at the top of that list is Oklahoma State. It's a program that has been a consistent winner under Coach Mike Gundy, a solid all-around program, and would immediately be a factor as one of the best football programs in the Pac-12. So certainly prioritizing good football programs matters here, and with Oklahoma State's track record and solid all-around athletic department, Oklahoma State should be near the top of the list for the Pac-12 and expansion candidates. If we look beyond Oklahoma State, we stay in the Big 12 for a team like Baylor. Baylor won a basketball national championship. The football program has improved significantly in recent years. There's a brand new stadium, and of course, getting into Texas for recruiting purposes would be very valuable. So Baylor could be near the top of the list. A program like Texas Tech, if we stay in the state of Texas, for recruiting purposes, it could be valuable. Texas Tech also has a track record of playing in high-scoring offensive games, and we know Pac-12 after dark, high-scoring games could be very appealing. And Texas Tech, of course, has been a consistent winning program in the Big 12 in recent years, especially going back to Mike Leach. So a strong track record of being able to put good football teams on the gridiron. With Baylor, Texas Tech, you have some strong candidates in the state of Texas. Also, Houston. Houston is scheduled to join the Big 12 next year, but this could be an option for the Pac-12 as well because it's a big-time market in the city of Houston. It gives the Pac-12 a brand new media potential, and also Houston has been willing to invest in its football program as far as a new stadium, facilities, coaching staff. There's a willingness to spend in a football crazy state. So Houston, even though it hasn't joined the Big 12 yet, could be on the radar for the Pac-12 as well, especially when you consider the need and probably the willingness for the Pac-12 to get into Texas for recruiting purposes. And one final team from the state of Texas that we have to talk about is TCU. TCU, with a great location in Fort Worth, Dallas, especially for recruiting purposes. They also have a willingness to spend. They just spent a lot of money in recent years to improve their stadium. The willingness to spend for the coaching staff. I think with the need to get into the state of Texas, programs like TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, and Houston will be near the top of the Pac-12's list. If we stay in the Big 12 and we look at other candidates to consider, there are a couple other teams that the Pac-12 might have a lot of interest in. One of those is Kansas. Yes, Kansas has struggled in football, but they bring a great basketball program to the conference potentially. Lawrence, Kansas, not too far from St. Louis, not too far from Kansas City, especially for the Pac-12 trying to get into new markets. I think the question with Kansas is, would they be willing to pursue an invite to the Pac-12 knowing that a potential move to the Big Ten is on the table. So Kansas might have to sort out its standing in the Big Ten expansion pecking order before it decides anything on the Pac-12. And finally, we have to talk about Kansas State and Iowa State as Pac-12 expansion candidates. Kansas State has been more successful in football than its in-state rival Kansas, but not as strong of a location in Manhattan. I think Kansas State would probably rank behind Kansas in terms of Pac-12 expansion candidates. And Iowa State, of course, the same thing, doesn't bring a big-time recruiting territory to the Pac-12, but they bring a very passionate, strong fan base, and especially when you're looking at well-rounded athletic departments, Iowa State is up there as well. So Kansas State, Iowa State, and Kansas also potential candidates to expand into the Pac-12 if it looks beyond the state of Texas. If the Pac-12 looks outside of the Big 12 for expansion candidates, there are two obvious picks. Number one is Boise State. Boise State has been one of the top group of 5 programs in college football. Not to mention, perfect location. They could slide basically into a new version of the Pac-12 North and be rivals with Oregon and Washington and Washington State and Oregon State. They've been a winning program, no doubt about it. They could be successful in the Pac-12. Also, BYU, a strong all-around program. The question would be, would Utah also want its in-state rival in the same conference? If we look outside of those two, San Diego State, great location and improving football product over the last 10 to 15 years. They don't necessarily add a new market, but they add a very quality football program and basketball program to the conference. Outside of that, UNLV, great location, obviously in Vegas, but they have struggled in football, and it would be a significant climb for the Rebels to be competitive on the gridiron in the Pac-12. And finally, one other team from the Mountain West to watch is Fresno State. Fresno State, much like San Diego State, would help the Pac-12 fill the void in California left behind by USC and UCLA. Certainly not going to be able to replace that big brand appeal, but if the Pac-12 wants to fortify its position in California, adding two teams that are great geographic fits like San Diego State and Fresno State make a lot of sense. Now that we've looked at the candidates, the question is, which teams should the Pac-12 want the most in conference expansion? I think we have to start with Oklahoma State. Solid all-around athletic department, consistent winner in football, willingness to spend as well. I think Oklahoma State would be a no-brainer if the Pac-12 wants to expand. If we go beyond Oklahoma State, I think the Texas schools make a lot of sense here. Texas Tech, Baylor, Houston, TCU, some sort of combination of schools from Texas make a ton of sense for the Pac-12 as it looks to get into a new market and also add new recruiting territory. Kansas is the interesting pick here. We've talked about it. They have struggled in football, but they bring a great basketball program to the conference. They are also doing the right things in football to improve under new coach Lance Leipold. The question for Kansas will be, is there a potential to move to the Big Ten in the near future? If there's not, the Pac-12 could be a step forward from the Big 12. The Pac-12 has a lot of interesting candidates. Obviously, none of them high profile in the great brands of USC and UCLA, but there are a lot of interesting and solid programs that the Pac-12 could look to add in the near future as it expands to replace UCLA and USC. A key question that many of these teams have to answer is whether or not it's more lucrative or better to make the jump from the Big 12 to the Pac-12. Which conference has more stability? Which one is going to be better over the long haul is a real question. Also, financially, which one will be more lucrative? Both of these conferences have television deals that are coming up. A lot of uncertainty about revenue for both going forward. If you're a team like Oklahoma State, is it better to stay in a Big 12, especially if Kansas, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Houston, Baylor, TCU are still in the conference. I'm Steven Lasson. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Steven LCFB, where we will stay on top of all things expansion, realignment, and everything going on in college football all year round.